Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's set of lectures where we start to look at metaphysics. Right? These are questions about the nature of reality. And the first topic in metaphysics that we'll look at is the topic of personal identity. We talked about Descartes last time and how he provided to us a example of how to be a modern philosopher. And the example we looked at was his method of doubt, where he wanted to find out things he knew for certain. So just think about what we learned up to that point. We had philosophers that told us to question all the time and take a look at your assumptions and don't take them for granted. And you can imagine after a while, if you just continually think, I have to question my assumptions, you may not have any more beliefs yet. So Descartes had this notion that if you could just find out some fundamental truths, right, some basic things that we knew for sure, then you could slowly build up your house of knowledge off of that foundation. So the one thing he said he thought he knew for sure was that he existed. And as a result of doubting everything he knew to get to the fundamental thing that he thought he could know for sure, he realized that he couldn't help but doubt. He was always doubting. And if he was always doubting, then that must mean he was there to do the doubting. So, his first truth, I exist. Well, there's a question that we'll be taking a look at this week concerning that statement. What is this I? I mean, who is this you that is watching this video right now? What is it that is here right now watching this video that was also here, let's say, 2 minutes ago when you first started by pressing play, right? If we say we exist, we say there's an I, then what we mean oftentimes is that I have been here moment to moment or moment by moment, right? There's a me that has persisted through time. So if you signed up for this class, let's say a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, you say, I signed up for this class. And then here you are watching this lecture, you go, I am watching this lecture. Well, if the I that signed up for the class is the same I that's watching this lecture, what's that I? What is that thing that was here back then when you started signing up? That's also here now when you pressed play and started watching this video. Okay. So who or what is this I? So we often take the sense of me for granted, right? So if I asked you to describe where you are, what might you say? Okay, where are you? Maybe say something like, I am in my home, or I am in a chair, or I am on the earth. Whatever answer you give, there's assumed within there some sense of personal identity, right? You already assume some idea of what this I is. Can you get a sense for what that might be when you answer this question of where you are? How about this question? If I asked you to point to yourself, where would you point? Where instinctively, where would your finger be pointing? Right? Would you be pointing here? Would you be pointing here? Where would you be pointing? Does that maybe give you a sense for intuitively where or what you think this I is? If I asked you if you were here last class, so let's say watching the last lecture, right? Did you watch the last lecture? And you go, yeah, I watched the last lecture. Well, what was there watching the last lecture that's also here right now watching this one? What is that thing, right? What's the thing that makes you you? Okay. Here are some scenarios I want you to think about. And then in your own mind, you know, let me know. Do you think we have the same person in each of the scenarios? First scenario, if a person changes their name, once they change a name, would you say, yeah, they're still the same person after they change their name? Changing the name doesn't change them. Or would you say, no, they're a different person now just because they changed their name? How about this scenario? A person takes on a new identity as part of the witness protection program. Okay, so they were witness to a crime and the government wants to protect them, so they're going to give them a new identity. Would you say, well, they're still the same person? Maybe new name, new location, but they're still the same person. How about the third scenario? A person goes on a diet and goes from 400 pounds down to 150 pounds. Would you say they went through a transformation? Would you say that person lost pounds? Or would you say, no, they are a different person now, even though they've lost apparently over half of their mass, right? Okay, how about the fourth scenario? The person who lost most of their body in military combat and now lives with 3/4 of their body being synthetic. Would you say this person is the same person who originally enlisted in military combat? So maybe you have a relative or friend that goes off to war because of the destruction and violence. They lost some limbs which were able to be replaced with synthetics. When your friend or family member comes back, would you go, "Oh my gosh, who are you? I don't know you. You're not the same person. That's not you." Or would you go, "Wow, look at all that you've gone through," right? You have gone through a lot, implying that the you here is the same person, the same you that enlisted. So what do you think? Is it the same person? How about number five? The person goes from being depressed and suicidal to being passionate about life. And that could be the result of, maybe they are now part of a religion, or maybe they took some time to go through therapy or any sort of reason like that. Would you say that the person now is the same person as the one that was depressed and suicidal? Or would you go, no, no, that's not the same person? Right? Think about how you would phrase it. Would you say to yourself that this person has gone through a dramatic transformation? Or would you go, no, they are different people? The person now that's happy and passionate about life is not that person that I knew who was depressed and suicidal. How about number six? So let's say you are 60 years old now. If you are 60 years old at this point in your life, are you the same person who you see in baby photographs that mom and dad said, "Hey, look at you when you were born"? Are you that person? Is that you at a younger age? Or would you go, no, 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 that's a stranger. That's not me. What does your intuition say about that? Right? You've had this in your photo album. Hey, look, here's my picture of when I was born. Mom and dad took a picture of when I was born. Would you say now at the age of 60, that is not you? Or would you say, no, that was me 60 years ago? How about number seven? Let's say somebody you know gets into an accident and loses their memory. You go visit them at the hospital, they have no recollection of who you are or who they used to be. Would you say that is your friend that you knew since high school? That's my grandmother that I grew up with? Would you go, that's a stranger? Would you go, that's not a person I know, that's a different person? Your intuitions about this will give you, for each of these scenarios, gives you a sense, right, for what fundamentally you might be assuming makes you you. Can you get a sense for what that might be for yourself? It also highlights something for us, right? It highlights the idea of what we mean by same. So what do we mean when we say same person? Well, that's not too clear. So let's identify what we mean here. There's a couple ways of looking at the word same. One is to talk about numerical identity, and two is talk about qualitative identity. Okay, so let's take a look at numerical identity. Numerical refers to something being literally uniquely the thing. Okay, so for instance, if I showed you my remote control, my clicker for my slides, right? And let's say I put it down on my table and then I pick it up again. In some sense, I could say this clicker that I'm holding now is numerically identical to the clicker that was on the table a second ago. And that is numerically identical to the one I'm holding up again right now. It's uniquely that thing, right? It doesn't just look like it. It's not just like a replica. No, this is the same thing that was on the table just now. It is numerically identical. This is numerically identical to what I showed you like 20 seconds ago on the screen. Now, that's different from qualitative identity in this sense. Well, if you ever go to the store, you can find a bunch of these, right? The exact same model, exact same brand, right? The exact same clicker. Well, what do we mean by same there? Because what I'm holding now isn't in the store, right? There are others in the store that are the same as this one. Well, we mean it's qualitatively the same, looks the same, feels the same, etc. Right? You go to a car lot, like a Honda dealership, and you see like a black Honda Accord, and there might be a bunch of those in the lot, right? You drive it to test drive, and then you sign the paperwork to buy it. Well, the car you take home, we would say, is numerically identical to the one you test drove in the lot, right? Because the one you test drove the lot is the same one you take home, but there's still a whole bunch of other Honda Accords that look exactly the same, right? What we say then is that those Accords, those Honda Accords, are qualitatively identical to the one you took home, right? Not numerically identical. Let's use one more example. Let's say you buy a pack of number 2 pencils, right? The ones you have to use the pencil sharpener to use. Okay, so you have a pack of them. Well, you take one out and you use it to do your quiz, right? A Scantron quiz, and then you put it in your backpack, and then you take it out for your next class and do the quiz. Well, the pencil you use for the second quiz, we would say, is numerically identical to the pencil you use for the first quiz. Now, is it numerically identical to the other pencils in the pack you bought? No, it's not numerically identical because this is not numerically the same as the ones in the pack. Those didn't go through those 2 quizzes. The one in your hand did. But the ones in the pack, we would say, are qualitatively identical. Okay? So in our questions of personal identity, what we're asking for is numerical identity. What is it that makes you right now numerically identical to the you that started watching this video, right? That's the sort of identity we want to look for. That's the sort of sameness we want to look for. And the main question becomes, well, what's the essential property that is here in you right now that was also in you when you first started watching this video, right? What's the essential thing, the thing that actually makes you you? And this is in contrast to accidental properties, right? Properties that could change over time, but it's still you. So the question in our class for this week is, well, what are the essential properties to make you numerically identical to you 10 minutes ago, a day ago, a year ago, when you were born, right? What is it that is still here? What's the essential property that can't change? Because if it changes, it's not you anymore. It's there, right? So what's the essential property that is here now, that was here 20 minutes ago, that allows you to say, look, still there, that's still me. Okay? So this might sound like a trivial sort of discussion, right? With me, like I know I'm me. I can. What does it even matter? What the essential property is that makes me over time? Well, this is why we took a look at the Stanley Tukey Williams case, because personal identity seemingly does matter. It matters a lot how we know you are you, right? Remember, in this case that you worked on in class for your philosophy cafe assignments, we had in 1979 a person who was very angry and violent. They were a gang member and they murdered 4 innocent people, right, in 1979. But when this person called Stanley Tukey Williams was about to be executed, the 2005 person that we're about to put in the chair was a peaceful, much older person who wrote children's books that spoke about how you should not go into gangs, how you should abhor gang violence. And as a result of their work, inspired many youths, many famous people, I mean, people who eventually became famous, to go and live their lives away from gang violence. So when it came time for his execution, there were a lot of protests, a lot of people, especially celebrities, that spoke out against the execution because they said, no, this is not the same person. This man saved my life. He wrote books that I read when I was a kid, and it inspired me to not get caught up into gangs. So I had you guys think about this. And in particular, I gave you this question to ponder. Was Tukey in 2005 enough of the same person as the 79 Tukey to justify his execution? Or did the state execute an innocent man in 2005? Now, for a lot of people, when they do this discussion, a lot of it is going to revolve around sentences and phrases like this. Well, Tukey changed and was remorseful, but he's still guilty of committing the crime. Or Tukey may have just turned his life around because he wanted to leave prison. Like he didn't want to stay there. So it's still him, but he just decided to act differently in order to get out of being executed. Or, no matter how much Tukey writes, it still doesn't change the fact that he murdered those people. There's a lot of discussion that will revolve around those kind of ideas. But notice that's not answering the question. Remember what we looked at last week about arguments. In order to take a look at the quality of an argument, in order to address it, we have to first figure out what the issue is. The issue here that I posed to you in the question was about personal identity. All of those examples I just gave you already assumed it's the same person from 7905. But what is it? What is it that's here in 05 that was also there in 79? If you can't identify it, then how do you know it's the same person? Do you notice how a lot of your discussions may have already assumed that 79 Tukey is also 05 Tukey? Right? No. He changed. He changed his behavior, but it's still the same person. He still committed the crime. What is it that's here in 05 that was there in 79 that allows us to say same person? That's what the discussion should be about. The discussion should not be about whether or not um, execution or capital punishment is a justified act, right? Whether we should even have it. The discussion should not be about whether or not writing books against gang violence and being older excuses a person's past behavior. No, the key question, the issue is, well, what is it that makes a person the same person over time? It's so ingrained in our way of looking at the world that we don't even realize we're making an assumption. We don't even realize that we're assuming it's the same person because it's not so easy to answer. And we'll find that out in this coming week, that it's not so easy to answer. So, what do you think? What is it about a person that makes them the same person over time? You'll be reading several theories about personal identity in the upcoming lectures. But in your Flipgrid reflection for this week, I'd like you to think about that for yourself. If somebody asks you, hey, personally, what do you think makes you you? What is it about you that's here right now, that was here yesterday, that you go, yeah, that's what makes me, me? And hopefully that gets us thinking about this question in a little bit deeper way.